My name is Adele and I absolutely love sewing my own wardrobe. I've been doing it now for about 3 or 4 years and I make all sorts of clothes, dresses like this one that I've got on, t-shirts, trousers, skirts, you name it, I've probably made it. Now, what I want to talk about today on this little video is how we can help keep our ready to wear clothes going for longer, and in particular sewing on buttons once they've popped off, because I know, well, in my house this happens an awful lot. My husband loses a button on his shirt, it then stays in the wardrobe, and each morning when he thinks he might wear that shirt, pulls it out, realises that the button's missing, pops it back in, and we just go through that cycle. And all it takes really is about 20 minutes, 10-20 minutes, just to sit down and sew that button back on, and then you can wear that outfit again. So I'm going to be showing you how we can actually replace that missing button on one of my husband's shirts that, like I said, has been sat in his wardrobe. Right, the 3 things that you need is a pair of scissors, some thread. Now it's important to try and match the thread to what has already been used on the buttons. So this shirt of my husband's has used a white thread, so I've got white thread and then a needle. Okay, now I was really lucky that my husband managed to remember to pick up the button when it fell off, but sometimes we're not so lucky because we may actually realise that the button's missing a while later. Now, if you don't have the button, what you can actually do is, if you look inside the shirt or the garments for the label, sometimes they actually put on a spare button on the label. So here we've got one of the main buttons, and then this is a slightly smaller button which would be used on the cuff. So it's very useful, first of all, to look inside to see if there's a spare button if you don't have one. Now, if you really don't have any spare buttons, what I would recommend is that you try and match the size and the colour. Now, it doesn't matter if it's not exactly the same match, because having any button put on is much better than having a missing button, but just try and match the colour. Now, as you can see, this is where the button should have been, and we're going to put the button back on here. Now, as I look at the other buttons, what they've done is they've done a crisscross shape. So this button has 4 holes, and instead of going round in a square, we're going to go opposite to diagonals in order to put this button back on. So I need to get some thread. Now, sometimes actually not cutting too much thread off is actually very useful because it can get quite tangled up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my needle with my cotton. Now, this is always challenging, but practice makes perfect with this. Right, so I've threaded my needle, and on the other side what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a few knots. Now, you need to do a few so that it doesn't come through when you first make your first stitch. So I recommend maybe 3 or 4 small knots building up so that you have one big knot. And what I'm going to also do is cut off that little bit of extra. I'm not going to cut too close, but just a little bit, just to neaten it up. Now, it's always challenging to get the first thread through in the right place. So I was very lucky that where the button's actually gone, it's left me a sort of mark of where I'm going to put the new button. But if you struggle to know where to put the new button, get the buttonhole on the other side and match it up. Okay? So if we match up our 2 sides, you can see this is where my button is going to go. Right, so what I recommend first, before you even put the button on, is first of all put your needle through. So you want to start on the inside of the shirt and put your first thread, your first needle through. And then what I'm going to do is get the button and pop it through one of the holes. Okay, now this first part, I admit, it's really tricky because the button can move around quite a lot. But do you remember what I said? We're not going to go forwards and backwards, we're going to go diagonal. And that's going to make a nice secure button once we've done. So once I've done the first stitch, it's more stable. Okay, now I want to come back from the inside to the out through the same hole that I did before. I'm going to just do these 2 holes first, and I'm going to build up those stitches until it comes more secure. So there I've done 2, and already you can see it's much more secure. So from the inside, ooh, see, it's tricky, inside, up and down. Now I'm going to keep doing this until I feel that it's secure enough. Right, so as you can see, I've done diagonal stitches and I've only been concentrating on 2 of the holes. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the crisscross. So I'm going to come up through that one and down through that one. And again, we're going to do about 10 stitches to make sure it's secure. But you can see already it's starting to feel more secure by building up those stitches already. So I'm going to come up through the hole that I've not used before, oh, there, and I'm now going to go across. So I'm making an X shape with my stitches. Okay, so I've now made a cross shape with my stitches. Now, if you've got quite a big button, it might be useful to go over them again, but I think that's going to be secure enough that my husband's not going to lose it. Now, we're going to turn it to the inside. Now, this is the important part. I can't just cut that off because then it's going to start to unravel. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do some stitches through in between all the stitches that were made when I was doing my button. And every time I do this, I pull it really tight because that's going to secure the button on when I cut this thread. Now, to fully finish, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my needle through those stitches, and then I get the long tail, the long loop, and just wrap it round twice from the tip of the needle and then carry on pushing. Now, by doing that, I'm actually creating a knot, and that's just to give me peace of mind that it's not going to come off. So I've now finished my button, so I'm going to cut my threads. I'm not cut it too short, remember, because if we cut it too short, sometimes it starts to unravel. It's okay to leave a little tail. And there we are, a new button back on my husband's shirt. So now we can wear this again. Now, buttons can look very different, and we have to approach how we attach our different buttons in different ways. So first of all, I've just gone through my button stash and I've picked out 4 different buttons that we would sew on in different ways. First of all, this is like the button that I've just sewn on for my husband. It's got 4 holes, and remember what we did? We went across. So we made a cross shape with that. Now, like I said, this is a bigger button, so I would actually spend more time with those crisscross stitches to make sure that is secure. So that's one with 4. Now, sometimes we can get a button that only actually has 2 holes, and all that we would do there is we would come up one of the holes and down through the other. Now, when I attach buttons like this, I always make sure one of the holes is what I come up from the inside out, and then one of the holes is the one that I go down. Now, there's other types of buttons that from the front, you can't actually see any holes at all. And these are attached different ways on the back. And you'd quite often find these on the outside of big coats. More of a decorative button, these ones are. So let me first of all talk about this one. Now this one, as you can see, has sort of a platform, a part that sticks out, and it has a hole. If I get my needle, you can actually see there's a hole that goes through. Okay, now these can be a little bit tricky to attach because you're having to do all of the stitching underneath the button. So you would go in through one side, out through the other, then through your fabric, and keep going that way. Now this one is a really unusual button because if you look underneath, it's actually got like that, the hole, but it's more flush, it's more flat. So what I would do on this one, if I use my needle, you can see I push through from one side to the other. So these buttons are trickier to attach, but like I said before, I quite enjoy, if I've got buttons to put on, sitting down in front of the TV with my needle and thread and my scissors and just get on and put my buttons back on. Because there's nothing worse than forgetting about that until you try and get that shirt, that dress or that coat out of the cupboard, wanting to wear it, but then you can't because you're missing a button. So just sometimes taking a few moments out, and I find it very relaxing actually, putting buttons back on. So I hope you found it really useful, the demonstration of how to attach a button. Let me just quickly recap what I went through. So remember, if you can't find the button, first of all, look inside because there may actually be a spare button there. But if you're really stuck and can't find a button, all I recommend is that you check the same colour and around the same size. Now, the 3 pieces of equipment that you need are your needles. This is what I keep my needles in. A needle, pair of scissors and some thread, and remember to match the thread to the same colour that's already been used because after you're finished it looks more professional, I think. Right, attaching our button, don't forget it takes a little bit of time, but if you're just patient, like I said, I find it really therapeutic just going through, and with the 4 button, to make it secure, go and across diagonals to make the cross shape. But yeah, I think he's going to be quite happy when he comes home now and finds that I've put his shirt button back on so that he can actually use it. Right, I hope that I'm going to pop along again soon and talk about other ways that we can actually mend or repair our ready to wear garments so that we can use them again. And if I make some more, I might start talking a little bit more about my own dressmaking journey and see if we can make some projects together. But thank you so much for watching. I hope that everybody is well and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.